Hello, my name's Mike, or if you please, Taz, and on behalf of Dr. Sean and Deb, I'd like to welcome you to Free Speech, Part 1. It's our fifth video in Jester Politics series on the Constitution. In this video, we're going to talk about what is and is not protected speech, and in the second part, we'll talk about the attacks on free speech that have been going on throughout our history. Before we get into the meat of the matter, I'd just like to dispel a myth I keep hearing. People keep telling me that the First Amendment is the First Amendment because it protects our most important rights. That's not quite true. Initially, the Senate referred 12 amendments to the states for ratification, and what's now the First Amendment was really the Third Amendment. However, the states failed to ratify the first two, making the Third Amendment the First Amendment. So the First Amendment leads the Bill of Rights not because it protects our most important fundamental rights, but merely because the states failed to ratify the first two. Now, the First Amendment consists of a total of 45 words protecting 5 fundamental rights: freedom of religion, freedom of speech, freedom of the press, the right to peacefully assemble or to protest, and the right to petition the government for redress of grievances. In this video, we're going to talk about the free speech clause, 10 words that, in my opinion, protect the most fundamental right that we have. In fact, a right so fundamental that I do not believe that you can have a free society without it. So the question becomes, how expansive are our free speech rights in America? And the short answer to that question is more expansive than any other country in the world that I know of. However, they do have some boundaries. So anybody saying they're a free speech absolutist is wrong. At best, you can be a free speech maximalist, which I think we all should be. So exactly where are those boundaries? Well, the first important case to set those out, at least modern time, is Brandenburg v. Ohio, which was decided by the Supreme Court in 1969, where they set out what's become known as, surprise, the Brandenburg test. And it's a two-pronged test. The first prong says that the speech is protected unless it is directed to inciting or producing imminent lawless action, and the speech is likely to incite or produce such action. In order to violate the first prong of this test, the speaker not only must have intent to incite unlawful action, but he also must intend for that action to be imminent. In other words, he can't be advocating for some unlawful action at some undefined point in the future. In order to violate the second prong of the test, his speech also must be likely to incite such action. An example would be you're standing in a bar filled with cops and you scream, "We need to go burn down the police station later." Well, that may not be the best idea in the world, but it's still free speech because you didn't violate either one of the two prongs of the Brandenburg test. First, you're only advocating for some illegal action at an indefinite date in the future. And second, your speech calling to burn down the police station in a bar full of cops is not likely to produce such action. So yeah, your speech is still protected. There are also a few categories of speech that are unprotected that fall outside the Brandenburg test. The first of these categories, of course, is child porn, which, to be quite honest, I can't think of anything more disgusting. However, in 2002, in Ashcroft v. Free Speech Coalition, the Supreme Court, led by Justice Kennedy, Stevens, Souter, Bader Ginsburg, and Breyer, ruled that virtual or computer-generated child porn is protected speech, at least insofar as it doesn't use the images of actual children. However, with the advent of artificial intelligence, the child porn gang are making child porn videos that are indistinguishable from actual children, and this is now being challenged again in the courts. We'll have to wait and see how it shakes out. In the meantime, the law right now is that child porn using actual children is highly illegal, and they're locking these pedophiles up. The other categories of speech that are not protected include true threats. In order to violate the true threat doctrine, you'd have to make a threat to a person, and that person would have to believe the threat to be real. Another category of unprotected speech is what is referred to as fighting words, which is a doctrine the court's been moving away from in recent decades. In order to violate that, you'd have to engage in a face-to-face confrontation with a person in which words are used that would incite a person to violence without thought. It's a very, very narrow exception to free speech, and one very rarely invoked. Obscenity is another area. However, that exception to free speech has been exceptionally narrowed over the years, even though the test remains the same. Other areas of unprotected speech, of course, are fraud, perjury, defamation and speech integral to criminal conduct. In other words, you can't engage in extortion, criminal conspiracy, solicitation to commit a crime, etc. Other than those areas, all speech is protected speech in the U.S. But what about hate speech, people say? Yep, hate speech is protected speech. In 2017, the Supreme Court held in Mattel v. Tam specifically that there is no hate speech exception to the First Amendment. But, of course, misinformation and disinformation has to be unprotected speech. I mean, the government's been trying to censor that for a long time. And not so fast, Mav. In Alvarez v. U.S., the Supreme Court held that lying in and of itself is protected speech. Now, if you lie in order to defraud someone or to gain a monetary interest or some other benefit, then that may be unprotected speech. But lying just in and of itself, misinformation, disinformation, that's all protected speech. From the gang here at Jester Politics, I thank you for watching our video and hope you'll join us for the next one when we talk about the attacks on free speech throughout our history. Have a good one. Bye.